There are only two things to discuss about this game and why I feel it's so concerning, considering all of the information that was given to us all the way from February of last year up to now. Now, I have created a playlist discussing my initial thoughts, and the link to this playlist, if you're interested, of course, will be in this video's description. I'll start with the easiest one, which I can imagine is the most controversial part of Pokemon Legends Arceus, and that's, of course, the graphics. These graphics are rough. They are absolutely pitiful considering what the Switch is actually capable of. Look at these rocky textures. Can you honestly look at this and say that this is a Switch game? Because this is nothing that can't be replicated on a 3DS and a DS on its best day. And yes, let's get the obvious elephant out of the room. Graphics, of course, are not the most important thing about a video game, and this is when you realize that you can only use that game footage is not final statement for so long before you realize that maybe, just maybe, there's a lot more finalized than you care to accept. Look at the ground. What the fuck is going on here? Now, if you want to throw in the lore, the fact that this is the Hisui region, and all of that other petty shit that has nothing to do with the lack of effort that they put into the visuals in this game, fine. But at the end of the day, you can't sit up here and tell me that better than this isn't possible. And let me bring up another argument that I want to contest. Yes, with a game like New Pokemon Snap, it makes sense for them to put more effort into the visuals because it is nothing more than an on-rails camera shooter. There's significantly less going on with the gameplay compared to a main series Pokemon game, not to mention less Pokemon assets compared to the hundreds in a main series Pokemon game. But is that it? Must we always bend the knee just because the type of Pokemon game determines how much effort they put into the visuals alone? We're not even talking about art styles here, ladies and gents. I wish I could make excuses and people would make excuses for me if I try to run those mental gymnastics concerning why I can't do better. I'm not asking for PS5 and Xbox Series S and X graphics. And then there are other defeatist arguments like crunch and other first world problems that again wrap around the fact that that's a problem that anyone with a job has to figure out. If I make significantly less than the employees behind the highest grossing franchise and I don't get the luxury of people making excuses for me and even reasons for why I can't do something and do something better, what makes them so special and immune to just doing better? Hell, anyone remember Little Town Hero? Another one of Game Freak's babies? Neither do I, but it goes without saying that this cel-shaded art style alone would have been more preferable, and damn, for a game that is a gameplay misstep manages to do one thing right, and that's the thing I'm talking about, visuals. Let that sink in for a moment and tell me that any excuses and even reasons you can make for the game devs not doing better will actually hold up. AAA titles or not, you've seen better on the Switch. They can do better, and that better isn't impossible. The developers' first world problems and excuses made for them and dispersed by them don't really hold up thanks to those three realities. This is exactly why the bar is set so fucking low when it comes to the franchise as a whole. And now that other thing. Now again, in my initial takes, I praised the game for being different. I'm going to talk about why that is concerning. You go on a fetch quest. One of those things you're doing is classically catching Pokemon. And props to Game Freak, I guess, for making that multi-dimensional, since it wraps around this whole fetch quest idea that the game seems to have going as one of its biggest points concerning its gameplay. And it seems that's all you're doing when it comes to you catching all of the Pokemon. You're just micromanaging your catches. How does this Pokemon look? You're out there fighting totem-like Pokemon, whether it's you and your Pokemon experimenting with this staying alive, bravely default-like battle system with the strong and agile styles, playing strategically, or you'll just find your ass murked and handed to you if you make poor decisions otherwise. That's nice that they're throwing elements from other RPGs into the game. Then you throw in some customization to remain consistent with the many quality of life things introduced into the franchise since X and Y. And after all of that, well, that seems to be the entire gameplay loop. Hisui / old Sinnoh lore withstanding. My hope, anyway, was for them to take that formula, make it fresh, with all of the aforementioned, of course, while honoring things that formula did right as well. And of course, the only other thing they had to do was have Pokemon Legends Arceus offer its own gameplay aspects while tying everything together and keeping it interesting. But I personally can't feel anything more than the apple falling not too far from that stagnant tree. If that's the gameplay loop, well, they really need to work some magic to keep all of that interesting long enough to distract people from getting bored, because it just feels like it's going to be as repetitive, if not more repetitive, than the stale formula that Pokemon has been suffering from for many years now. Now, I'm all for seeing how all that's going to play out, because a lot hasn't happened since February of last year, considering all of the trailers of the game, which are ultimately more of the same thing from a previous trailer and a collage of shit you can read up on the site. Where are things like breeding, held items, and abilities? They've done a great job mentioning and showing absolutely none of that. Oh yes, they have crafting in the game as well. If you want to present a new take on the franchise by combining other elements from other RPGs, fine. I guess that's the appeal about Pokemon Legends Arceus, but how well will you tie all of that together and keep things interesting? Because the biggest thing that any veteran, anyone that has been with the franchise for any good amount of time, is most concerned about is the stagnancy, not to mention how repetitive the franchise has gotten and can only get over the years. What the fuck do I care about a Shinx's ears? What ability does this thing have? How do IVs work? Is there any kind of competitive aspect to this game? Or is it ultimately going to be its own thing? And should I take it as such? Those are things to think about, and that's why it's so concerning to me. I still applaud the game for daring to try something different. Without a mention of abilities and held items in Pokemon Legends Arceus, that's a reminder of how bad different can be, especially if you're rehashing ideas from games that quite frankly just didn't work. It still gets points for trying, no matter how it turns out, and it's ultimately a stepping stone that Game Freak should use when it comes to them redefining the stagnant Pokemon formula. I guess it goes without saying that this will always be Game Freak's play. The concern isn't there because the visuals could use some work. Holy fuck, is this supposed to be a mountain? The concern is there because whether Game Freak listens, whether it's different, whether it's familiar, or whether they do what the fuck they want to do, what they do with the highest grossing franchise lies in their mentality to play it safe.